Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Social Selling for Enterprise Sales webinar today through BrightTalk. My name is Rebecca Smith, and I will go ahead and start getting into this webinar. Very excited. So first, I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for joining us on the line today. I hope everybody was able to get into the webinar okay. I'd love to thank L&T for all of their help and assistance with this webinar, Cooper Pickett, Shana Robinson, Jonathan Allen, Adela Fine, and to BrightTalk as well for this opportunity. I want to go ahead and get started by sharing a little bit about who I am so you kind of have some relevance and know who it is that you are hearing from. My name is Rebecca Smith. That's a picture of my face. I am the marketing manager and sales coordinator at Criteria for Success, which I'll explain to you in a minute as well. I'm referring to myself as a content queen because I love to write, I love to research, I love the whole idea of inbound marketing and sharing content with the world. I'm also a very curious social seller, so anything related to social selling and best practices related to social selling really interests me. It's been really cool to discover new things over the past few years, and it's only continuing to change and grow. And I have on here the 3 C's. The last one there you'll see is crazy, but no really, just to share something, I guess, a little bit more personal about how insane the presenter that you're listening to is. This is a picture of me racing sport bikes. I'm originally from Florida, and we used to ride year-round there. I live in New York City now. So that's just a little piece of the crazy, but perhaps this is the crazier part of the crazy, me actually crashing, which is very common. So you're definitely hearing from a nut today. And there's a skydiving adventure. So definitely love to explore the world and learn new things. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'd like to share a little bit, too, about the company that I work for. Fantastic, amazing, great people here. Criteria for Success is the name of the company, and we are a sales growth partner that provides sales training technologies that help our clients to sell more. The reason why this is relevant to this is that we are sales trainers, and what we do is we train people on how to sell more. And of course, people are asking more and more, well, how do I grasp social selling? What can I do from a social end of things to sell more? So we've really been diving deep into this concept and trying to find ways to help our clients make the most of social media and this concept of social selling. We have successfully grown sales for companies in these industries. So hopefully this resonates with those of you that are on the phone. We've worked in technology, staffing, media, energy, not-for-profit, creative, large retailers, pretty much any and every industry. We've worked with them in regards to sales and growing sales. Now, granted, every company works a little bit differently. So we've learned some tricks of the trade from different industries, and it's always exciting to work with a new industry as well. The way that our company works is we combine sales training with a sales playbook because we believe that that equals success. It's not just the sales training, it's not just the actual elements that you're going to use to make a sale, but it's also having a playbook that you're using to document best practices. And that's something that we're actually going to talk about as a tool a little bit later in this presentation. The goal here is to connect this idea of philosophy and mechanics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this idea, but it's the difference between the philosophy behind why you're doing something and the action of what you're going to do to achieve that task. So for example, creating a prospecting action plan is the philosophy behind it, and actually executing that plan is the mechanics. We also aim to squash this. Now, normally I would ask, does anyone know what this is? But since I can't hear you, I'll go ahead and just tell you that this is what we refer to as head trash. It is a huge thing in the sales world, in every world really, pretty ubiquitous across industries, that a lot of times what stops us and prevents us from moving forward is our own head trash. And kind of thinking we're not good enough or we can't close this deal, I can't accomplish this. So I urge you, if this is something you're struggling with, squash it. So let's go ahead and jump into this beautiful webinar about social selling now that we've kind of gotten through the intro, and I hope that that helps you to really kind of understand a little bit of the background context to this conversation. So just to define social selling, this is actually straight from HubSpot. They define social selling as using social media and social platforms to interact with prospects and customers. Pretty straightforward. Salespeople provide value by answering the prospect's questions and offering thoughtful content until the prospect is ready to buy. And we'll talk about why this is relevant in a minute. I'd also like to define for you this concept of enterprise sales and the most important aspects of it as it relates to social selling. So I've kind of pulled out what I think are the four most relevant pieces of an enterprise sale. The first being that the prospect or the customer often takes the control. There are often multiple decision makers as well during an enterprise sales process. This also will often require an RFP or a proposal of some sort, and these types of sales often have a longer sales cycle. So this is kind of how we're defining enterprise sales as it's relating to this topic. And here's how they connect. So we're going to break down each one of these four elements and how they pair with each other. But this is just a brief overview so you can get a quick glimpse into how the conversation will move forward. So the prospect taking control, we're going to address that by talking about HubSpot and other types of platforms similar to what HubSpot does. The concept of SEO, blogging, content, multiple decision makers. We're going to talk a little bit about prospecting using LinkedIn, using social to kind of mine a little bit, and again, HubSpot to back up that process. And before I continue, I say HubSpot quite a bit because obviously I work in marketing. I'm the marketing director here, and HubSpot is the platform of choice here. If you're using something else, the same rules apply, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper as well. Then we have the RFP or proposal, and we're going to talk about deal, which is a pretty cool strategy that I think might help you guys. And the longer sales cycle, that goes back to workflows, which if you're not familiar with workflows, you will be after this webinar. So just to break it down, here's our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about inbound processes, a little bit about outbound processes, and about a sales playbook and how it assists you in all of the above. So, leading social sellers create 45% more opportunities and are 51% more likely to achieve quota. This stat here comes from LinkedIn and is a really encouraging quote, but is also really relevant and true. We here at CFS utilize different aspects of social selling, including some prospecting using LinkedIn, and have found great success in it, and I would say that our numbers have improved by these plus some since we started using our social selling processes here at the office. So the prospect or customer takes control. As it relates to social selling, this is where inbound marketing comes in. So I'd like to break it down and start from scratch because I don't know exactly who is on the call and who is where with their familiarity with inbound. So we're going to go ahead and define it so we're all starting at the same point. Inbound refers to marketing activities that bring visitors in. This is very crucial. Content that is put out there into the world that's drawing visitors in, rather than the marketer having to go out and get a prospect's attention. So here are kind of four aspects of content. The first of this would be a newsletter. That could be considered a piece of content, even though you are reaching out. So let's focus, I guess, a little bit more on the middle two, which is blogging and resources. When you're creating content that is for your audience and for your buyer persona, you are drawing your customers in. So just to give you a quick example of what SEO has to do with this, let's say that my buyer persona, my ideal buyer, is a CEO. And that CEO's immediate need is that they want to grow their sales team, increase their revenue, and overall just create a better culture within their sales team. So we would create a piece of content geared towards that and optimize it for SEO to match. So potentially it could be something along the lines of sales leadership, and we create a blog post that's geared with the keyword sales leadership. That piece of content is now living on our website, but the more people that view it and the more people that interact with that article, the higher we're able to rank in Google, which just means that the hope and the goal at some point is that when somebody types in sales leadership into that Google search, our article comes up first for the search results organically. Of course, the goal is to try to get somewhere organically, if at all possible. We also do the same thing using resources. So creating an ebook. A recent example would be we wrote an ebook called How to Build a Winning Sales Team. And it's geared towards VPs of sales, CEOs, and things of that nature. You're creating content that is of value and of interest to your audience. And then as well, sharing that content on social media is going to help to get your voice out there. You know, not everybody is going to find you organically using a Google search. So making sure that you're scheduling whatever content you're putting out there, whether it's a blog post or a resource or things like that. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with me? I'm in sales. This is my marketing's job. This isn't my responsibility. My answer to that is that it's really important for marketing and sales to work together. Because while marketing understands the analytics behind what a potential client might be looking for or searching for or want to read about, sales really understands the language of prospects. They're out there in the field, they're speaking to people, they're talking to people, they're having really in-depth conversations. Here at our office, we integrate marketing and sales so much so that we almost don't even know where the line is sometimes. Our sales people and our sales team, including actually everyone at our company, writes blog posts. And we believe that everybody has something different to say, something important to say, and says it in a different way. So we have a lot of different voices. So I definitely encourage you, if you are in a sales position, to get involved in the process with marketing and helping them to kind of determine the type of content that your potential prospect or client is going to be interested in. So to give you some examples of this, on the top right there is an example of a resource, an ebook. That's an ebook that we wrote. That would be something that if someone's interested in sales prospecting, that they would come across and say, oh great, a sales prospecting action plan. This is valuable for me. This is helpful. On the top left is an example of a blog post written about sales process steps and how a playbook can help. So this is also geared towards what people that are in our industry are looking for. And then the bottom two are just examples of social shares. One's from LinkedIn and one is from Twitter. So the first thing that I'm going to recommend to anyone that's in enterprise sales, if you don't have a marketing team, you don't have a marketing department, or you do have a marketing department, just make sure that you guys have a tool for inbound marketing that you're using. Whether that be HubSpot, Marketo is another one, Pardo is another one. I don't want to be impartial, in this. We use HubSpot here in our office. We're very comfortable with it. So it's something that I'm going to be sharing just as an example today in this webinar. So I'd like to show you an example of a landing page. So first, you're creating content that's geared towards your audience. And like I said, if you're in sales, be a part of this process, weigh in during the process of content creation. This example is sales prospecting, a sales manager's strategy to sales prospecting. So perhaps a sales manager wants to know how to create a sales prospecting action plan for their team or help them to develop a plan for doing more prospecting. They either come across this from a social share or they come across it organically through Google. But they're brought to this landing page. On the right-hand side, you'll see that's where they fill out their information to download this particular ebook. After they click submit, they go to what is called a thank you page. On the thank you page, they can open up the ebook from there. But perhaps what's more important for enterprise sales is that this is where the lead nurturing process starts. So someone found your website, they discovered your content, they found it valuable, and now they are going through a journey with you. This is an example of an email that someone would receive once they click that download. So not only did it pop up there that they could see the PDF, but they also get this email that has the attachment in it as well. Leads then go into our CRM system. We happen to use Salesforce.com, but I definitely recommend if you are not utilizing a CRM system, get one. If you don't have the budget for it, you can always go with HubSpot. They have a free CRM. I have not used it, but I have heard good things about it. Once those leads are in your system, you can then track the data to see what are people interested in. So let's say they came into our website because they were interested in prospecting ideas, and they downloaded an ebook on prospecting. What happened after that? They clicked around some more. They downloaded something on a sales playbook, or they downloaded something on creating email templates. This helps so much when you're mining through your data and trying to plan in the future what kind of content to create for your potential prospects. So that's a little very brief into the inbound marketing side of things. But I'd like to go back to one of the things that I mentioned before with the follow-up email. And this goes back to a longer sales cycle. So a lot of times with enterprise sales, the sales cycle is a little bit longer. For us here at CFS, 90 days is a pretty typical, an average time period for us to go through the process with a potential client. So workflows are really important. You can't always, you don't always remember to email somebody at the right time, or perhaps they're too early in the stage to start a phone conversation. And this is where sales can get involved. So just as an example, we have our lead salesperson here, Lindsay, attached to a workflow for prospects. And what that means is this. So if somebody downloads an ebook on our webpage, they are going to get a series of workflow emails. And it's set up and scheduled to go during a certain amount of time. So let's say they download the ebook, they meet certain criteria. So for us, they meet a sweet spot for us. They go into a certain workflow. It then triggers them to go into a certain workflow. So they're pushed into this workflow where they get an email every certain amount of days, after 4 days after the download, another 4 days after that, etc. And the emails are not, hey, do you want to buy something from us? But they are all along the stages of, you know, I see that you downloaded an ebook on the sales playbook. Do you need help with this? And kind of putting yourself out there as a resource for whatever it is that they're interested in. Obviously, not all pieces of content work like this. For some of our pieces of content, the workflow is simply recommending other resources that are similar to the resource that they downloaded. But if it's strong enough and close enough to your product or service and to your offering, it's definitely okay to reach out and ask them if they need more help with that particular piece of information. So it's not a sale, because that's kind of against the whole philosophy of inbound marketing, and I do want to stress that. But I wanted to give you an example of a workflow and how it works for sales. To transition a little bit into multiple decision makers, this goes back to prospecting and what we were speaking about before with the whole prospecting ebook and things like that. This involves a little bit more of what we're referring to as outbound, since we were just talking about inbound. So let's kind of define what outbound means for sales and marketing. Really, it's referring to a promotion of a product or a service through continued advertising. So, for example, this would be an ad that you're posting on social media or on a web page or a TV commercial, brochures. Information that's going out there into the world is what we consider to be outbound marketing. So if inbound marketing means that the customers are coming to you, outbound marketing means that you are reaching out to those customers to bring them into your buyer's journey. I found this really cool infographic a little bit back, and I thought that it was helpful between inbound versus outbound, drawing customers in the funnel versus going out. That's kind of a definition of outbound, but I want to talk a little bit about outbound sales, because that's what we're focused on here, is how do you sell in an outbound sort of way? How do you reach out? How do you prospect using social media? How do you find the right contacts and people as you are mining through all of this social data? A couple tools that I'm going to mention here are Twitter. Twitter is a fantastic place to research the interests of your prospects. So we're going to get in depth with LinkedIn and kind of talk about how to find the right people. But once you find those people, then what do? You want to make sure that you kind of know, are they the right person? Are they the decision maker? Are they the right person in the right place, essentially? And Twitter can actually really help you do that in a business setting. We have discovered so much about companies and about individuals through using Twitter. I also have on here a snapshot of the HubSpot Daily Prospects Digest. This means that these are people that viewed our website or our landing pages that HubSpot has identified as being a prospect for us. So that's another great place to start. They already did the work for us, so they're saying these companies are interested in you, and we can kind of dive deeper in HubSpot and see what website, what web page they came in on, what they were interested in when they were on our website, and things of that nature. But for really, really true outbound sales prospecting, LinkedIn is definitely the way to go. We use Navigator here at our office, and I'll share that with you as well as we move forward. Okay, so here is a picture of Charles and I, this is our CEO here, performing what we refer to as snossaging. It's simply what we call prospecting using LinkedIn. It's kind of an internal joke of a name. If you want to hear the story of it, you can call me later. But we get together twice a week to prospect using LinkedIn. So here's what we don't do. Thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn and then messaging me 5 minutes later with a sales pitch. So this is definitely not a best practice for LinkedIn. If you're doing this already and it's working for you, awesome. We have not found great success through cold outreach on LinkedIn. Instead, we have a very specific process that we use to prospect on LinkedIn. So here's what it looks like in a nutshell. We have an Excel spreadsheet. That Excel spreadsheet can be worked one of two ways. We can either start with someone that we know. So let's say that I have a great friend, Jane Smith, and she works at a company in Midtown, and she knows a lot of people. I can go on Jane's LinkedIn, look at her connections, and mine through it using Navigator to determine who would be a good fit to work with. I would then reach out to Jane via email, which is the second to last image there. I would use my playbook to store the email template that I'm going to use to send to Jane, and to give a template for Jane to send to the person I'm asking for an introduction to. And then I track everything using Salesforce. The second way to do this is to prospect companies. So let's say that I really want to focus on media companies as a prospect. I can sort those companies using LinkedIn. You could use regular LinkedIn as well, but I tend to find better results with Navigator to really mine through the types of companies that would be a good fit, create that list of companies on an Excel sheet, and then break it down as I go through the process. So I'm going to show you kind of a deeper dive into what this looks like. So the first step is to create your targeting list, compile your data, then use Navigator to find those companies or to select employees. Use your playbook. Really, really use your playbook. I can't encourage you more on this, and we'll talk a little bit about playbooks in a minute. But using your playbook will really help you to track templates and develop your process further. We use email rather than using InMail through LinkedIn. We find that we have a better response rate, a much, much higher response rate by using email. People tend to feel more comfortable with that, and you get a quicker turnaround time. And then we use Salesforce to track what we're doing while we're prospecting in LinkedIn. So this is a lot to explain over a 30-minute webinar. So I'm suggesting here, I actually wrote an ebook about this process. It's called How to Generate Sales Leads Using LinkedIn. And it completely develops out the two processes that I just briefly summarized for you here. So if you're curious on how to do this process, I would definitely download the ebook, and it'll help you to get started. Just keep in mind that it is a process, and when you start reading through it, you're going to go, oh my God, this is so much work. It is a lot of work, but it does produce results. So I can't stress that more. There's also the ebook on sales prospecting that might be a good pair and help with that. So now let's jump into this idea of the RFP or proposal. You know, during enterprise sales transactions, a lot of times they require an RFP or a proposal, and our answer to that is what we refer to as a deal document. Now, deal is something that lives in our personal CFS playbook as well as all of the clients of CFS. And I want to kind of get into a little bit about what a playbook is not. A playbook for us is not a manual. It isn't something that's written out, it was written in 2011 and we're still using it today. Instead, for us, a playbook is something that's interactive. It's really a living, breathing thing. Ours is a piece of technology that is a wiki, very similar to Wikipedia, where you log in and you have access to all of the pages. You can add pages, edit pages, remove pages, and it's where you really build out the best practices for your sales team. Our recommendation, if you're going to create a playbook or you already have a playbook, to focus on 5 areas. An area for prospecting. This is all about getting more leads. Have an area or a section for selling, because this is about the actual close. A support section for helping the team to work together and really support one another. System, this would be other platforms and other things that you use, other processes like your CRM or your marketing team's systems. And then team is all about tracking results and KPIs and things like that. So that's our recommendation if you're creating a playbook. Here's an example of what our playbook looks like, just so you can kind of get a visual of what that means. And you can see the tabs on the top there for prospecting, selling, system, support, and team. Once you click on those, it'll bring you into more detailed descriptions for each of those elements and kind of break it down further. But I don't want to get too deep into that. I just wanted to give you guys some suggestions and potential advice, because we're going to talk about deal. This image here, this slide here, is a picture of some of the very, very many pieces of information that we store in our sales playbook. So, breaking radio silence, keeping prospects engaged, handling objections, etc. But Deal is really one of our favorite tools and one of our most useful when it comes to managing the sales process, and especially when it comes to RFPs or proposals, because it's part of it. So just a quick summary, this is actually what Deal looks like in our personal playbook, and it has the philosophy and the mechanics behind it. But Deal is an email tool and a strategy. It's tactical, specific, and for us it's produced really, really positive, valuable results. This is an example of what a deal looks like, and it basically has a few components to it where once you have a fantastic meeting with someone that you've prospected, so let's say you were prospecting using social media, using LinkedIn, you identified a person that would be a great fit, you asked a mutual connection for an introduction to that person, you were then introduced to that person, they were willing to have a conversation with you, you had that conversation, now this is where you follow up with a deal document. And the deal document outlines everything that you've talked about so far, what they're looking for, what you're looking to achieve, and it really ties up all of the loose ends. It's a fantastic piece. We actually just put this deal document resource live on our website. I believe it was a week and a half ago now. So if you're interested in learning more on how to create a deal document or the process, it is also on our website. I have a picture here where resources are. If you click on resources and then click on all, you can see all of the resources that we have. A couple of them I mentioned here in this webinar, particularly the resource on how to generate leads using LinkedIn, I think would be really, really helpful for you guys. There's one on social selling. There is one on a sales playbook, and then there's this great resource on Deal, which I think would be a really useful tool. So that was a lot to get through. I didn't know if I would be able to get through all of it in a half an hour, but I'm happy to say that we made it 32 minutes. And this is the part of the webinar where we open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in your questions, audience questions box. I believe it's to the right of you, and I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. All right, cool. So I have the first question here. What do you think are the best ways for people in sales to integrate themselves into the marketing sector? How can they get that conversation started? That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. Being that I work in marketing and work directly with my salespeople, I definitely have taken the initiative as the marketing person to involve sales in the process. One of the biggest things that I recommend to you is if you're in the sales position and you're trying to get involved with marketing, is kind of just go to whoever your head of marketing is and say, you know, I'd like to include you in our sales meetings, and start at that point. If you start getting them involved in your sales meetings, you'll start to open up the dialogue a little bit better and have these conversations. It's also great to ask them questions, to say, hey, I'm curious, where do you get your ideas from for content? Or what kind of content are you putting out there? What kind of results are you seeing? The great thing about marketing is that we've got a lot of analytics. So you can always go back to the marketing department and say, hey, how did this do? How did this perform? You know, would you be willing to try this? But of course, be cautious about stepping on toes and all that stuff. So I hope that answers your question as to ways to integrate themselves. If you're a writer, if you're interested in writing, if you have ideas, that's always something that marketing appreciates. I love that about integrating our sales and our marketing teams is, you know, they're feeding ideas to marketing. So that's a really helpful thing. Another question here, when doing outbound sales, how do you really connect with the potential customer and not make them feel like you are just trying to sell them something? That is a fantastic question. So we've tried a couple different methods. A little over a year ago, we were doing some direct outreach on LinkedIn where we were reaching out to a potential client, and just like you said, like, how do you make it not this crazy weird thing? And we found that people were really off-put by the cold outreach, and that is why we created this process for warm introductions. So while we identify somebody in a cold sort of manner, we don't know each other, we only ask for introductions to people that someone we know knows. So for example, I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say that we wanted to work with the Apple sales team, the sales team at Apple. I would use LinkedIn to determine who do I know that knows someone at Apple, and then find the best fitting title for that person to get introed to. Now here's the kind of clincher with this is that sometimes you'll ask your connections for a request to somebody and they'll say, oh, I don't actually know them. I don't even know how I got connected to them on LinkedIn. So definitely be prepared for that. We've kind of determined that sometimes it works a little bit easier if you actually give someone that you know a list of people that you want an introduction to. And then this is where the playbook comes in. You want to develop out templates that kind of have a warmth to them. So when you're emailing someone that you know and you're asking them to introduce you to somebody that you want to know, a potential client, make sure that you provide a template to your connection that is going to be a little bit warm. So for an example, I'll use the Jane Smith example. I'm asking Jane to introduce me to the VP of sales at Apple. I would say, Jane, hey, we were doing some prospecting. Would you mind introducing me to this person at Apple? If you don't know what to say, here is a template that you could use. And the template is going to differ in different ways. And if this is something that you're looking to build out, I'm definitely happy to help in any way that I can. And I'll give you guys all my email address at the end of, actually, I'll go ahead and click the slide forward so you can write it down. Okay. I've got a bunch of other questions. I hope that one was answered. Do you have an example of when you've used data from Salesforce to inform future content? Has that content then usually done better as a result of using that data? That's also a great question. Yes, we actually have. So the piece of content that we have created on LinkedIn was actually a result of a very kind of not a great resource that we put out. I'll be completely honest with you. We put out a resource on LinkedIn headers a couple of years ago. LinkedIn was kind of getting bigger, and people were really trying to optimize their LinkedIn pages. So we created this resource on header images. So if someone wanted a free header image, they could download this. What we discovered from our data is that became pretty much our #1 download. People were really interested in this LinkedIn header. And it got us more interested in LinkedIn, because if everybody keeps downloading this and they're interested in LinkedIn, what are we missing? So we opened up some conversations with some of our clients that downloaded this particular resource and said, well, why did you download this? And they're like, well, LinkedIn is huge and I'm always trying to do things. And that kind of spawned some future content. We blogged about LinkedIn, we blogged about social selling, we blogged about this content. And then it eventually adapted into the how to generate leads using LinkedIn piece of content. So we take content that we see that is really popular and that people are really interested in, and then adapt that further. Let's see. I've got one more question here. How can I explore creating a sales playbook with CFS for my company? Send me an email. Please send me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you about this idea and concept of a sales playbook and how that would apply to your company and help you guys to grow and build. We would determine what your goals are for it, what you're trying to achieve, and then we can kind of go from there. Let's see. I think do I have one more question? I hope that answers everybody's questions. All right, I'll leave it open for another few minutes if anybody has any other questions or if you need me to elaborate on the questions that were asked. And I did have some feedback here that someone was, they enjoyed the webinar and they were hoping for something that was a little bit more in depth as well. And I really appreciate that feedback, and I couldn't agree more with you. It's so hard to get really in depth in a half an hour. So I hope that this overview was helpful for everybody. But I'd love to keep the conversation going after the webinar if you want to kind of deep dive on any of the things that we talked about today. Any other questions? All right. I think I'm going to wrap it up. I don't see any more questions here. I would like to finish by saying I'd be happy to put on another presentation that's a little bit more in detail on prospecting using LinkedIn, which is that resource that I've mentioned a few times now. It definitely would take at least a half an hour to just go through how that works and some ideas and concepts that would apply to your particular industry and kind of what you're looking for. But I'm happy to explore that more. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed kind of going through a couple of things. I hope people found a few tidbits here and there. And I hope to talk to everybody again in the near future. And be sure to connect with us on social media and LinkedIn.